My name's Yvonne, for those of you that haven't met me before, and we also have Tallulah working hard in the background as a peer facilitator. So she's going to be working to facilitate the chat and engage people in the chat. So for those of you that haven't joined the Skycast before, welcome. I'm just going to go through a quick tour of the website, just so that you're all familiar with how to use it. So at the top button, the top arrow points to a button that says I need help now. This button is going to be quite important in this session because we're discussing depression. It may bring up some unwanted feelings, unwanted emotions, or you may feel like you're struggling to cope, which is completely fine. So if anybody does feel like that during the session, then please click the I need help now button. Then either myself or Tallulah will message you directly after the session and also provide you with some resources that you can make use of. I'm also going to place a link in the chat, so if you're feeling like you need further support, then you can also do so. To the left-hand side, you should be able to see me, so I'm just going to do a quick wave. Directly underneath me, you should be able to see a list of participants and attendees in this session. So at the moment, we have 3 people, and as time goes on, I believe more people will join the session, so not to worry about that. I'm also going to talk about confidentiality in a minute as well. To your right-hand side, you should be able to see the chat section, and you should be able to see where I've just said hello and welcome to Understanding Depression. Before we begin the session, there's just a few things I need to go over, so bear with me. So in order to get the best out of the session, I would recommend to just try and be present for the whole 1 hour. It's going to last the whole hour, but it's going to be a relaxing space and a very supportive space, and it goes quite quickly. I would also advise that maybe you put your phones to one side because you're taking this time for yourself, so it's best to make the most out of it. Just to remind you that everything we talk about in the session is confidential, so not to worry about any thoughts and feelings that you're sharing. These won't be shared beyond this Skycast. Of course, the main purpose of the Skycast is to provide support for people facing depression, or even for those that want to gain further information on depression. So we need to ensure that we respect one another to make sure that everybody feels comfortable to express themselves. And even if we don't necessarily agree with somebody, let's just try to understand where they're coming from and respect their position and what they're trying to express. So as I mentioned, the I need help now button. This is crucial because, of course, we're happy that you're here in this session, but the most important thing is to make sure that you're looking after yourself. So if during the session you feel like you need to take time out, that's completely fine. But please press the I need help now button rather than putting your message in the chat section, because if you express that you're finding it hard to cope in the chat section, this may prevent the session from going on. But as long as you press the button, somebody will contact you. Finally, this is going to be a very interactive session, and we are entitled to share as little or as much as possible. And being online, sometimes it is a lot easier to talk about how we're feeling. However, it can at the same time be quite difficult to talk about how you're feeling. So there's no pressure to contribute to the chat. If you want to, you're more than welcome. And if you don't want to, there's no pressure at all. Okay, so there will be opportunities where I would say, let's have a chat about this, let's discuss this. And if you feel like you don't want to contribute, that's completely fine. But of course, if you want to, then go ahead. So I'm now going to go over today's aims. So we're going to provide some information about depression, including the signs and symptoms. We're also going to discuss the common myths about depression, just so that everybody leaves with a better understanding of what's true about depression and what's a myth about depression. We're then going to explore some practical coping strategies for living with depression, so that way everybody leaves knowing that if they face depression or they have faced depression in the past, they will be equipped with some new coping strategies. Or if you're here to just gain further information on the topic, you will also learn different coping strategies. And of course, we're going to be, we're here to meet other people facing the same issue, because as we may already know, depression can feel quite isolating. So now the intro's out the way, let's begin. I just want everybody to make sure their chat section is working. So would everybody be able to say hi to one another, and maybe describe your depression as an animal. So if depression was an animal, what animal would you use to describe it? I'm going to turn off the video for a minute, just to give us a chance to communicate with one another in the chat section, and then I'll come back online and have a discussion about this. So thank you all for contributing to the chat, and for those of you that didn't, I hope you were able to understand where everyone was coming from. I'm also going to say, even when the webcam's back on and I'm talking, you can still type along in the chat section if you want to, because as I said, we have a peer facilitator that's available to keep the chat going with you. So yeah, so depression was described as various different animals, and I think some of the key points were the fact that it can creep up on you, it doesn't give up, it does tie you down, at times it's easy to mask your symptoms. So that all gives us a further understanding of how depression can feel when you're suffering from depression. And being able to recognize how depression makes you feel may make you feel more comfortable to talk about your symptoms with maybe your family and friends. However, there's so many myths and so many ideas about depression that make it hard for people to open up. There's so many myths that make it seem like depression can be a choice and people bring it onto themselves. And this again can make somebody who's struggling with depression feel quite isolated. They may feel like they don't want to talk about how they're feeling because of the fear of being judged by other people and the fear of thinking that people believe it's a choice. And of course it's not. So I'm gonna do a survey with you all. So I just want to do this quiz so that we can explore the different myths behind depression and just think about them and explore them individually and talk about them so that we're all aware of what depression consists of. And if we spot somebody talking about a myth to do with depression, we can correct them. And if maybe we believe one of the myths to be true, at least we're here today to gain a further understanding of the true facts behind depression. So on your screen now, you should be able to see a quiz. And just scroll to the top. Can you just take some time to answer the questions? There's 8 questions. And once that's all done, I'm going to come back on the webcam and I'm going to discuss the answers and just give you some more information on each question. So I'm going to turn off the camera and the audio, and I'll give you all a chance to do so, okay? So thank you all for taking part in that quiz. Now we're going to work to tackle these common myths about depression. So the first one was, depression is more common than AIDS, cancer, and diabetes combined. And you all agreed that this was true. And in fact, it is true. And unfortunately, although it's so common, there's a lack of understanding of depression, which makes sufferers suffer even more, because with people failing to understand how serious it is, it just makes people probably feel quite alone and probably feel like there is no help out there for them. But by being aware that it is a very common illness, that might make people feel a bit like, you know, I'm not the only one suffering from this, so that can provide some support in itself. Number 2, being depressed is a sign of mental weakness. I'm so happy that all of you were able to identify that this, of course, is false. Being depressed is not a sign at any level of mental weakness, and that, in fact, is a very common myth that still exists today. Some people seem to believe that being depressed is a lifestyle choice, that people choose to be sad, that people can wake up one day and just be happy, and you may have heard the common saying, just shrug it off, tomorrow will be better. But it's important to realize that being depressed has no relation to your mental ability. Being depressed is a mental health disorder, and it's something that people do suffer from. So just by being aware that it's not a choice, that again can make somebody feel a bit more supported, knowing that this wasn't something that they chose for themselves. So that's good that we were all able to identify that it's nothing to do with mental weakness. Before I move on to the next question, I'm just going to remind you, you can still type along in the chat. After I discuss these, I'm going to give you an opportunity to discuss your points as well. But at the same time, if you want to chat whilst I'm talking, that's completely fine. So the next one, someone in my family has depression, so I'm definitely going to get it too. So again, all of you, I'm so happy that you all understand that the myths of depression, because of course this was false. Although if somebody in your family has depression, there may be a genetic predisposition to develop depression. However, this is relatively low at 10 to 11%. So if somebody in your family does have depression, you're 10 to 11% more likely to develop depression. However, that's not a definite. So it doesn't mean if somebody struggled with depression in your family that you too will struggle with depression. However, if somebody has struggled with depression, then that may make, in your family, that may make you more aware of the symptoms to look out for. So that will be good. And if you do recognize any signs and symptoms of depression, it's obviously very important to seek medical advice. Number 4, depression can be brought on by traumatic life events. Oh, I'm so happy that you all realize this. So yes, that is true. But although that is true, like it was discussed in the chat, depression can creep up on you. So of course, if something traumatic happens in your life, this can give room for depression. But at the same time, you could be feeling absolutely great, everything's going well in your life, and at the same time, you can develop depression. So just to stress that there's not always an immediate reason for why you have developed depression, but at the same time, there can also be an immediate reason. So if you maybe lost someone you loved, or you've witnessed something very traumatic, then you can develop depression, but it can also creep up on you without you knowing. So the next one, if you have depression, you'll probably have it for the rest of your life. So one person thought this was true, and other people thought that this was false. And in fact, it is false, which is a good thing. So just like any other mental health problem, there is treatment available. So if you have depression, it's something that can be cured, it's something that you can survive, and it's something that you can recover from. Of course, there's some people that may develop a vulnerability to having depression, meaning that if they develop depression and they recover, they may develop it again. However, if that does happen, each time the person develops depression, they learn better on how to cope with it and how to manage the symptoms. But just to let you know, depression is curable, okay? So it's not a death sentence. It doesn't mean you're going to have it for the rest of your life. It's something that you can recover from, and many people have and will continue to do so. And there's many treatments available as well. So it could be medication, it could be talking therapies, it could be just simply realizing what's caused your depression and trying to change that situation. So it's a good thing that there is a cure for depression. The next question was, feeling depressed is a normal part of adolescence, young people just go through ups and downs as part of puberty. It's nothing. So one person thought that was true, the rest of you thought that was false. And in fact, that is false. So of course, feeling depressed is very different from feeling sad. So as a young person, there's going to be circumstances where you feel quite sad. However, that does differ strongly from what depression is. Depression isn't just waking up and feeling sad. It's more intense. It's more feeling lonely, quite deeply despaired, deeply sad. And we will go on to explore the signs and symptoms of depression, just so that you will learn how to differentiate between feeling sad and feeling depressed. And on that note, of course, being depressed is not a normal part of adolescence, and it's not a normal part of growing up. As I've stressed before, depression is in fact a mental health problem, something that can be cured, but it's not something that's just a normal part of growing up, not at all. So that's important to remember. The next one is, it's easy for young people to talk to friends about their feelings. And everyone agreed that that in fact wasn't true, and that's correct. It's not true at all. In fact, I think about 3 out of 4 young people fear revealing to their friends that they're suffering from a mental health problem, because they're quite worried about what their friends may think of them, or their reaction to that information. So it's not as easy as people think. So, but however, there are support networks available, and if you do feel like you can't talk to your friends, it is important to try and find someone you can talk to. That might not be immediately possible when you're in the midst of feeling quite depressed, because one thing about depression, it makes you feel like you don't want to talk to anybody. And if you do feel like that, that's completely fine. But I would suggest that if you're feeling like that, maybe try and write down how you feel in your phone or in a journal or in a diary. But it's very important to try and express your feelings, and eventually get to a stage where you feel strong enough to be able to talk about your feelings to somebody else as well, whether that's your friend or your family member or somebody else that you trust. Last but not least, the last question was, young people are most at risk of committing suicide. So I can see that we were quite split on this one. So some people agreeing that it was true, some people thinking that it was false. And in fact, it was false, because it's been found that elderly people are most at risk of committing suicide, and young men aged between 16 and 25, I believe, are more at risk as well of committing suicide. So I don't know how you feel about those statistics, or how you feel about any of these myths that we've discussed. I'm just going to take a second to give you a chance to just maybe talk about what you've learned from this, and maybe express what you feel like you can take from tackling these myths surrounding depression. So I'm going to turn off the video and the audio just to allow us to chat for a second, just to think about what we've learned from tackling these myths and what we may be able to take along with us by tackling these different myths about depression. Just basically recap the fact that depression can be cured, and it's important to stress to people that feel like it's a personal choice that it's not, and it's a mental health problem. And for people that do make comments like, okay, things will get better tomorrow, just to point out to them, you know, this is something that I'm suffering with, and maybe just force them to maybe educate themselves better on the topic. So just moving on, I just wanted to stress that depression can affect anybody. It doesn't discriminate, and there's also a few celebrities that have faced depression. So I'm just going to share these pictures of them. So Christian Bale, he's come out and said that he struggled from depression. We also have Professor Green, Davina McCall, and Frankie from the Saturdays. And the reason I've shown you this is just to stress that depression doesn't discriminate. It can affect anybody. It doesn't matter what race you are, what gender, your financial background, how rich you are, how famous you are. It affects anybody, and it does not discriminate. And this again provides further evidence that it's not something that people choose, it's something that can just affect anybody. And I think that's very important to understand. Just to point out, so the NHS have described depression as being complex and very widely, and it varies widely between people. As a general rule, if you are depressed, you feel sad, hopeless, and lose interest in things you used to enjoy. The symptoms persist for weeks or months and are bad enough to interfere with your work, social life, and family life. So just by looking at that definition, it just shows you that this is beyond feeling sad. This is beyond waking up and having a bad day. It's beyond just feeling I can't be bothered today. It's something that persists for weeks or months. It's feeling like you cannot be bothered to get out of bed. You physically don't have the energy to get out of bed. Things that you used to enjoy, you no longer enjoy. But it's also important to see these symptoms in the context of how long they last. So if you wake up maybe one day you was committed to doing football and then you woke up the next day and you didn't want to play anymore, that won't be considered as a sign of depression, because it hasn't lasted for weeks or months, and it's not consistent with you feeling hopeless or sad. But to just gain a further understanding of what depression feels like and the different symptoms and signs that come with depression, I'm just about to share a video with you. It's about 4 minutes long, and once the video is finished, we can discuss it, and then we can delve further into the symptoms and signs of depression so that you can recognize it in yourself or maybe any of your friends and family members that may suffer from it. So let's just watch this video and then we can take a second to discuss it.
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learnt not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks, so it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants, so go for a walk or a run and leave the mutt behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to re-evaluate and simplify my life. I learnt that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life.
Okay, so can we just take a second to just briefly reflect on what we've learned from that video, or any thoughts on that video, any feelings about how depression was described as a black dog? So just give us a second or two to do that, and then I'll be talking about different signs and symptoms associated with depression. So thank you for sharing your thoughts, and for those of you that didn't, I do hope that the video was beneficial to you and you were able to really identify that depression is very consuming. As it was pointed out in the chat, it does follow you around everywhere. At the same time, I do like the fact that the video also highlighted different ways to combat depression, and also made it clear that depression can be cured. So I'm now going to move on to talk about the different symptoms associated with depression, just so that if you recognise yourself experiencing any of these symptoms, you can speak to somebody and try and get help. And again, if you recognise these symptoms in a friend or somebody you know or family member, you again can maybe speak to them, just to explain that you're concerned and maybe encourage them to get some help. So the symptoms of depression fall into 3 different categories. We have psychological symptoms, all to do with how you're feeling, physical symptoms to do with the body's responses, and social symptoms just to do with how you relate to other people. So in terms of the psychological symptoms, this includes low mood, and again I stress this isn't just feeling sad because something's happened, this is extreme feelings of sadness. Again, I will stress, if you want to talk in the chat, or if something I say triggers you to say something in the chat, please feel free to do so. So yeah, you would also feel quite hopeless and helpless, feeling like there's no point for the future, having low self-esteem, so just really feeling like you're not really worth much, having no positive views of yourself. You can also begin to feel quite tearful, and this may occur when you're in public and it just comes over you and you just feel really tearful and really upset. Depression has a way to make you feel quite guilty as well, for no reason, but it just has this sneaky way of just making you feel guilty for something you've said, something you've done, even if it's completely rational and you have no reason to feel guilty. When you're feeling depressed, it tends to pick up on your weaknesses and just make you feel guilty all the time. When you feel depressed, you could feel quite irritable and intolerant of others. So as I stressed in the beginning, it is quite difficult to want to talk to somebody when you're feeling depressed, because one of the symptoms is you literally feel like you can't stand to be around anybody and you want to be quite alone. It can also cause you to have no motivation or interest in things, as I stressed. So being committed to something you once enjoyed may just seem like so awful when you're depressed. It may seem like, what's the point of doing this thing that I love? That can happen. When you're depressed, you might find it very difficult to make decisions because your mind might feel quite cloudy and feel quite messy and all over the place. So you find it hard to focus, and you just don't feel capable of making a decision. Or you might even feel like you don't even trust yourself to make a decision. So that's really important. So you may also feel like you're not getting any enjoyment out of life. So you may literally feel like you have forgotten what happiness feels like. Depression can also make you feel quite anxious and worried as well as having suicidal thoughts and thoughts of harming yourself. Just to mention, so if you are experiencing any of these symptoms, it would be important to try and seek some advice. Physical symptoms include moving or speaking more slowly than usual. So again, this is something to do with the decreased amount of energy your body has. You literally feel quite weighed down as well. You may experience changes in your appetite or your weight. So this can be, usually it's decreased, but sometimes you may comfort eat and you may be eating more. You may have digestion issues as well and unexplained aches and pains. Causing you discomfort. You may lack energy and lack of interest in sex as well. You just have no energy to do anything. And there may be changes to your menstrual cycle. And last but not least, you may experience disturbed sleep. So find it very hard to fall asleep at night or wake up very early in the morning. In terms of social symptoms, so you may feel like you're not doing well at work. Again, not really engaging with other people, avoiding contact with friends, because you're literally feeling like you just do not want to face anybody. And because of that, you may also neglect your hobbies and your interests. And because of all of this, you will or may experience difficulties in your home and family life. So just going over all the psychological, physical and social symptoms, it's clear that depression is very consuming. It takes up different areas of your life, not just one. It makes life seem almost impossible to keep on going. But at the same time, as I keep on stressing, it is curable, and that's something that people suffering with depression just have to be aware of and have to hold on to. I'm just going to give us a minute or two to just maybe express our views on what we think about these symptoms, or have we learned anything new? Is there anything that shocked us? So let me just turn off the camera and the audio and give us a second to do so. So, of course, you can continue typing, and I just wanted to say thank you all for being so open. The topic of having problems with your digestive system came up. So depression has actually been linked to your gut area. Because it's been linked to your emotional health. I'm not saying if you have a bellyache it means you're depressed, but it can be a symptom. I also wanted to say thank you for feeling like you can share what symptoms that you're experiencing or have experienced. And of course, there's no obligation to dive any deeper if you don't want to, but if you want to, you can. And yes, of course, anxiety can be linked to depression. As I explained on the psychological symptoms, you can begin to feel quite anxious and worried, and everyone knows when you feel quite worried, you do get like butterflies in your stomach. So it could be down to anxiety, and again, anxiety can be linked to depression, so it's all linked in a way. So I'm happy that we all have understanding of the signs and symptoms that relate to depression. But now I want us to think about some coping strategies. So now we're aware of what compromises depression, and if we suffered from depression in the past, or we know somebody that has, or we're just here to gain information about depression, knowing what the signs and symptoms include, having watched that video, realizing that it's not a personal choice, are there any coping strategies that we can put forward to help us overcome depression? So I'm going to give us a chance to talk to one another and put forward some strategies we think can help with depression. And then once that's done, I'm going to talk about some things that can help if you are experiencing depression. So can we just all do that, please? Okay, so of course you can keep on talking. I just wanted to talk about some things that can help. So depending on the level of depression, because depression can be mild, moderate or severe, so depending on the level, you may require medication. This can help. You may be able to make use of therapies where you talk to somebody you feel like you can trust. There are also other things that can help, and this was described in the chat, such as removing the factor that's causing the depression, trying to seek professional help. There's also 5 things that can increase our well-being, which again can help with depression. So number 1 would be to try and connect with family and friends. And of course, when you have depression, it makes you feel like you don't want to connect with anybody. But just being aware that you're suffering from depression and that's the reason you feel like you don't want to connect, and trying to push through that and trying to connect even if it's just sending a text to someone, but communicating with people does help. Another way is to give to people. So research has found that if you give to somebody or compliment someone, that can actually have great benefits for your own well-being. Number 3 would be to try and exercise. It's really amazing the effects that exercise can have in the brain, because it increases a neurotransmitter, I believe, called dopamine, and this makes us feel a lot better. You know that feeling you have after you've done a workout, feeling quite proud of yourself. So all of those feelings can contribute to helping you overcome depression. Another one is to keep on learning. So commit to learning a new hobby, maybe learning a new language, but just to commit to learning, because again, the sense of achievement can help you overcome the depression. And last but not least, it's important to stay in this moment, to be mindful, and something that could help you achieve this, maybe mindfulness. So it's just a technique to bring you back to the present moment, to make you aware of what's happening around you, and to prevent you from thinking about the past or worrying too much about the future. However, the most effective way to overcome depression, or start the journey to overcoming depression, is to realize what's caused the depression. So as I've mentioned, it could be a traumatic event that's happened and then you develop depression after, or it could be something that's creeped up on you because of something that's happened in the past. So I just want you to think, if depression was your friend, so your friend that's creeping up on you, making you feel sad or making you feel tired, all the different symptoms, what do you think this friend is trying to communicate with you? So what is depression telling you? Is depression telling you need to move away from something that you're doing? Is it telling you need to maybe stop speaking to certain people? Is it telling you need to seek help for something that's happened in your past? You need to find a way to talk to somebody. So the first step to overcoming depression is to realize what's causing it. And in order to do that, you have to take time out to realize what depression is trying to say to you. Unfortunately, we're drawing towards the end of the session. Before we go, I just want you all to take a second or two to think about what you've learned today and something that you're going to take away. I do hope the session has provided you with something that you feel can help you in the future or can help you now. And of course, if you do feel like you do require further help, it's important to seek medical advice. But just before we go, can we just everybody try and do a one-liner of something they've learned or something they're going to take away or something they've enjoyed in the session? I'm just going to give you a minute or two to do so. Sharing what you've learned, and I do hope that those of you who haven't shared anything have learned something and can leave this session feeling more equipped to maybe take the necessary steps to manage and cope with depression. So before I go, I just want to remind you that if you need any further support or further advice, then make sure you visit the website, and under the useful info column, there will be some links for you to follow. Just to remind you as well, next week we have a session on anxiety, and I know somebody expressed something about feeling anxious, so that may be beneficial. And anxiety is commonly linked to depression as well, so I think that would be very beneficial. So that's due to take place next week, Thursday at 7 p.m. Thank you all so much for attending and for being so open and honest. I do hope that you have got something positive from this session. And if there is one thing that you're going to remember, please remember that depression is curable, and you can overcome it, and you can live a life where you're symptom-free of depression. That is possible and it is achievable. So I'm going to end the session. Just to let you know, when I do, a feedback form will pop up. Please try and fill this out and give me feedback, just to ensure that we're constantly improving the service. Thank you once again, and do remember to visit the website for any further resources. Thank you, and bye.